Hi there, Paul Donovan here, and you are tuning into a video that'll teach you how to use your power better, especially in relation to the scale and the idea of being indiscreet versus diplomatic. It's a critical aspect of how you use your power well. Now, this was identified by Dr. Julie Diamond in her research, where she asked managers and consultants from all over the globe their experiences of leaders using their power really well or not so well. And then with her team, they themed and cross-referenced. Well, they came up with 7 scales. Now, that she has a 360 on this. You don't have to do that 360 to get value out of this video. I'm using those scales as a means to give you some practical insight about how to use your power better. So let's have a closer look at indiscreet versus diplomatic. And in the first instance, what is this scale really about? I'm going to ask you to listen carefully so that you can make a self-determination if you haven't got a 360. And by the way, I have no financial gain as to whether you take a 360-degree tool or not, but I would love you to consider where you might be on this scale. You see, if you're being diplomatic, you are being experienced. You are a leader who protects confidentiality. You refrain from gossip. You tend to prevent others from doing so as much as you can. And you air your grievances with the organization in a very responsible manner. And so when you speak publicly about the organization, it's done in a respectful manner towards the organization itself. So did you get all that? Let me just clarify. You protect confidentiality and you don't gossip. You work to protect gossip in other people, and you're very careful about how you air your grievances about the organization and how you do it, in what forums you do it. If you do those things, then you're going to be diplomatic. If you do things very differently to that, you're going to be indiscreet. Now, many leaders do not consider this to be something of any value to consider or being particularly important. In fact, many leaders air their grievances about their organization to the people who report to them. And they think in doing so, they're building relationship and strengthening bonds. In actual fact, they're being experienced as indiscreet, and people become less comfortable working with leaders who do not use their power well. So let's have a look at this. If you're going to be experienced as indiscreet, this is the sorts of things you'll be experienced as doing. You'll be careless with sensitive information. You just drop little bits of information that probably ought not. Have you ever mentioned to one reportee from another that they're having the other one's struggling with a certain area, or maybe they've got a certain number of days annual leave owing even? That's not information you should be sharing with anybody else, not even annual leave days. That's not your task to share that. It is your task to hold that information carefully and confidentially. So you may even spread gossip, just mentioning little things. You see, as a leader, you have access to information that those who report to you simply don't have. But if others experience you as not treating that with the greatest care, then you'll be experienced as indiscreet. If you're somewhere in the middle of the scale, well, then you are being seen as somewhat responsible in this area, but perhaps not entirely the case, and you've got room to move in how you manage sensitive information. And if you're being seen as diplomatic, well, then you're someone who's going to be seen as being very careful with sensitive information. You refrain from gossip, and you're very responsible and mindful about how you talk about the organization to people inside and outside the organization. It reminds me, many years ago when I worked for a large company, I had a particular manager who had a nickname. His nickname was he was the keeper. Now, he did play soccer. That's true. But he was called the keeper because everyone knew that he was senior, he was the marketing manager, but he was called the keeper because people knew he could be trusted with sensitive information. And it was just such a great statement of his character that he would be called that. And I wonder whether you would be experienced in that way. Are you indiscreet, or are you diplomatic? Consider carefully. Draw a line on a piece of paper right now and put a little mark there. Where on this scale might you be? because it's a critical expression of how you're using your power. So what has this got to do with power though? Why is being, experienced as indiscreet a use of power? Well, if it's not clear to you already, I want to just make it really plain. If you're a leader or a manager, you have access to information that others don't. And where you drop that information, even if you do it in a rather careless way, or maybe at moments in a very calculated way, that's very much a misuse of power. That's very much a misuse of power. You have access. Your rank gives you access to information others don't have. And if you are using that information in a way that is careless or gives you a little bit of comfort or enables you to, you think perhaps gain a certain esteem in the eyes of certain people because you know things, you are misusing your power. And everybody else knows it. We're very sensitive to this with the people above us, whether they're misusing their power through sharing inappropriate information. Even sharing something personal about your boss to people who are reporting to you, be careful as to why you might be doing something like that. It's indiscreet. All right, let's move on. So what do you get? What are the outcomes you get? Well, if you are experienced as indiscreet, you will begin to build jealousy, conflict, divisiveness, and you'll erode trust. So in this area, if you're experienced as indiscreet, you are damaging trust and you are likely to be creating problems in your team. That's the ultimate outcome down the track. But if you are diplomatic, well, you'll have a team that knows they can trust you with their sensitive information and they're going to give you more of it. And I don't mean just going to talk to you about their mother or father issues. I mean share with you potentially things that they're worried about in their work. Very much performance-related stuff. You'll be seen as trustworthy with information. So many bosses are not told things, but they think that everyone's engaging in full disclosure with them. But they're not. They're truly not. And one reason they may not be is if they're not experiencing you as truly diplomatic. So don't get embroiled in any kind of relationship dramas where you may find yourself sharing information that is not appropriate for you to share. And so if you do so in political dramas, it'll be very hard not to say things that you ought not be saying. So there are the outcomes. But let's have a look at what sorts of things I can give you as advice now. Let's be specific. You see, if you're being experienced as indiscreet and if you're behaving in an indiscreet manner, then I'd like you to examine your motives for sharing each and every piece of information that you share. Does it give you a little bit of a boost to share information that is sensitive, that's somehow juicy? What trade-off do you get? Are you gaining favors? So think carefully now about what you've shared and how you share it and what you get by sharing it. A life unexamined is not a life worth living, right? We know that saying from many years ago. I really would love for you to think now. Think about how you share information. We'll do an exercise on this in just a minute. If you're more along halfway the scale, make a practice of asking yourself, who could be offended or hurt if I shared this? And not just the people in the room, but the people outside the room who are likely to hear about it. Imagine anyone, if you're in a group or some kind of collective and you're speaking about a person, assume they're in the room with you. Just assume they're in the room with you, because not to do so is going to come back and bite you. You'll be experienced as indiscreet, truly. And I've known of many good managers, great managers, who had inadvertently dropped information about their boss or about one of their peers to their team who have reported to them, only to discover that it's come back up the circuit and they've been ultimately very embarrassed and ultimately had to apologize about sharing information with their team that was sensitive and they ought not share. It was awkward. They had to humble themselves. It was humiliating. They moved on. They grew. Learn from their experience. Please don't do it yourself. Okay, if you're diplomatic, then Now your task is to this. Look for the people who are, you think, gossiping, and take steps, especially people in your teams. There you want to hold a boundary to them. And now if you are diplomatic, then my advice to you is take it to the next level. How can you be more thoughtful and mindful about how you talk about this organization outside? I'm not saying take some sort of ridiculous PR trip and say a lot of stuff that's not true, but I do mean how can you speak about your organization which is respectful, which invites others in, and that doesn't look to embarrass those who are inside the organization. You're diplomatic. You're diplomatic. This is not about trying to score points with people, and it's not about trying to run a PR program. It's about dealing mindfully with sensitive information. Okay, so here's a little exercise for you. I'd like you just to relax as you're watching me now and you see this image behind me. And I'd like you to think back to the last social forum you're in where you may have said something that you thought was just a little edgy, just maybe blurred the line between something that you could have shared and something that you maybe thought you ought not. Can you go to that? You know, just relax now and go to a scenario where you think you may have shared something that was just a little bit beyond what was required. And ask yourself this question: what payoff did you get? What payoff did you get by sharing that? You see, we do it for ourselves. What part of you were you feeding when you did that? Did you wonder whether you were bolstering your sense of importance in front of the people you were with? Maybe you were trying to alienate certain people, or there was a revenge factor. Were you looking to appear in a certain way by sharing information that was somehow important, that you were somehow ahead of the game or beyond the curve? So I'd like you to become aware of how you were doing that. And I'd like you to write down now, even as you're listening and watching this video, which parts of yourself were you speaking from? The part that really wanted to look after their own self-image, the part that wanted to organize relationships so that you were still in good with the right people who had power. Become aware of that now. Now, if you can't acknowledge it to yourself in private, then it's very hard to go any further. But now you're on your own. Or maybe you're watching this video and you've got a little group and you can do this for yourself. Just consider that. And as you write those out, make a decision. Make a decision that you are full of all sorts of parts, but there are some parts that are better to lead from than others. The part that really is still concerned about how others feel about you and that you might be trying to gain certain esteem by sharing sensitive information, that's not the part to lead from. You have that part, so now make a decision to lead from the other part. The part of you that is sure who you are, the part of you that wants to fulfill your role and be purpose-driven, to work toward fulfilling the things that your role obliges you to do. That's the part you want to lead from, not the more uncertain, self-doubting parts. Okay, I hope that's helpful for you. This is all about being indiscreet versus diplomatic. It's a really fantastic lens through which to see how you use your power. Thanks very much. I hope you enjoyed the other videos, and check in and have a quick look at them since you're on the masterclass page. Speak to you soon.